Welcome back to Unscripted. In this episode, we continue our powerful conversation with Danielle and Karina, two inspiring single moms navigating life after divorce. They share their experiences in this new chapter of their lives, how their kids have adjusted, the new bonds they have formed, and how to face the challenges of disapproval with strength and grace. You don't want to miss it. Welcome to Unscripted, your guide to discovering the various options available to you in the integrated and collaborative medicine space. I'm Janine Barandi, and I've been treating patients with acupuncture for 10 years.
And I'm Jenny Poole. I'm a trauma specialist and somatic therapist with a passion for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. The objective of our podcast is to explore the various care options available. Through our years of practice, we've found that different modalities can complement each other and conventional medicine.
We hope our conversations resonate and help you find the right tools and specialists for your unique needs.
We believe in an advanced care model where the doctor is not the only expert. We encourage you to embrace a mindset where your practitioners are your teammates who ultimately empower you to take control of your health.
As with every episode, this is not intended to act as medical advice, and no patient-practitioner relationship is formed from subscribing or tuning in.
How's it been with your kids? Because I know how it was with my kids. Mine were, like I told you guys, 6 going on 7, 8 going on 9. So how did you guys talk about it with them?
Yeah. Well, Danielle and I have drastically different sort of dynamics and experiences with that, as I never married my son's father. In fact, I moved across the country away from my son's father as early as 4 months, when my youngest was 4 months old. So, and my oldest was just about 3. So they don't have memories of me ever being in a relationship with their dad.
Yeah.
It's always been just us. My ex-husband was their stepdad, and they actually seemed very relieved. It was almost like a coming back to each other after the separation. We, without his energy and his presence, we had the spaciousness to be ourselves and be the trio that we always were. And that my youngest son, who's 11 now, still sleeps with me, and he couldn't do that while I was married.
Yeah.
And although my ex-husband was a great guy, he was decent. He just kind of played it very kind of flat noted with the boys. He wasn't like the best stepdad. He didn't really.
That's a good that's a good place to diverse, because some step-parents couldn't be more, feel like my own, and some are like, my biological children, so I'll tolerate you.
Yeah.
It's just a whole spectrum.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our spectrum was just somewhere in the middle. I mean, I think they were just like cool dude roommates. Just like, hey, dude, hey, And so I just think with his energy gone, it was like a coming home. And it's been almost 2 years since our separation. And till this day, my kids will bring him up in sort of curiosity. Like, remember when, or why did you choose him? Why did you break up with him? Or, why did he ever do that? What did you see in him? Imagine if. And so, it still moves through their
Spirit.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you feel like you have to temper that with age-appropriate responses?
No.
Or do you feel like you can be pretty transparent?
I'm pretty transparent with my boys. Yeah, and I've always.
Which can still be age-appropriate. I just mean that. I know sometimes what I would share with, what I shared with my 9-year-old, for example, when I got divorced, is different than what I share with my 17-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find myself sometimes getting a little bit frustrated, and it's just with me, and I really do check through that. I check in with myself, and because they don't often understand, especially as I'm starting to date. I'm not fully transparent about that, but sometimes they'll get little peeks here and there, and they'll ask questions, and they don't often understand my sort of fluidity in it, right? I'm not a very, I don't know, what would you call it? A very typical kind of conservative, I don't know, kind of woman. So I don't know. I often have to really check in and make sure I'm using the right words and I'm being as understandable as possible. Like, hey, he's my friend. How is he your friend if you're dating him? Well, he's a special kind of friend. Yeah. And so just trying to navigate me taking a unique approach on my single womanhood and explaining that to two boys becoming men watching, it's really challenging sometimes.
And your kids are how old again?
14, just about 14 and 11. Yeah. And so it's been really interesting and also really adorable as they've seen me through my grief and they've seen me come out of it and start dating and be happy, and they empower me and they tell me things like, you deserve so much better. They often will imagine the ideal man for me, and they show up for me in ways that I know there's this message behind it of like, we've got you, Mom, you're not alone.
And and those two in particular have no contact with their bio?
They do. It's starting to develop and grow, but for the majority of their young life, their first years, they did not. And so, I've been solo parenting them since like the beginning. And
all the heavy lifting.
And then bringing in my now ex-husband was definitely very challenging, and he sure tried. And I have to give him credit that, to bring that full circle, my kids have handled it well, and they've been on my side. And I think we're in a phase of rejoicing the spaciousness that I've created for us to get back to each other with this sort of like, I don't know, excitement about life and where it's going and
it's awesome.
What's to come. You know? And I think that comes with me always just being like, we're going to be okay. Like, we've got each other, like me separating was never traumatic for them in the way that they worried about their home or their lifestyle or their love. Like, Mama always had that, so it wasn't like a big startling thing.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Good on you. That's really awesome. Sure. Yeah. How are your kiddos? I mean, you have a little one, so it's not like you're sitting with 3-year-old and
they're all, so my oldest is almost 12, and then I have a 9-year-old and then a 3-year-old, and they're all at completely different life stages, and they need like different type of parenting, and we're all just super in it right now. My older two have a better understanding. I feel like myself and my husband, my ex, I don't know what to call him because we're still kind of in between, we're both like calm and stable and able to like explain to them. We just basically approached it as like, relationships change, and right now our relationship is changing, and it's not a reflection of you guys, or we're still a family, but that dynamic is going to change. That's how we've tried to approach it, because we're still very much involved in like day-to-day life. So he moved out of our house, but he's living, it's like a 2-minute drive away. And so we're just navigating that. And that part's been really tricky. My older two have a better mental understanding of what's going on. They've like expressed their emotions about it in different ways. My youngest, my 3-year-old, he just doesn't understand. Like, he's like, why can't Dad sleep at our house? Why? He just has this confusion around it, because it's all he's known. And so that part's been emotional.
Age-wise, do you find that you have to temper, like, because I remember what I would say to my 6-year-old going on 7 and my 8-year-old going on 9. I like wouldn't say the same things because they've asked me questions later. I'm like, hey, as you get older, I can better give you a better like scope of kind of what some of the dynamics were.
Yeah.
But at the time, it just was like, hey, we love you, and the relationships change. Do you feel like you're tempering kind of what you say, or do you feel like you can just be pretty
I feel pretty open. I'm pretty direct with my kids, obviously in like an age-appropriate way, but I don't want to ever tell them something that's not true or even a half-truth. Like, I just change. We really just stuck with like, our relationship is changing. Kept it pretty simple, because I don't think, because we're so early in it, I don't think they want to know depths. I think they'll have those questions eventually as they like start to process and start to think about it. I think those questions will come up. Right now, it's just been the basics of like, just kind of step by step of like, this is what we're doing, and Dad's going to live somewhere different, and this is when you're going to Dad's house and when you're staying here. And then we've also kept an openness. We have some e-bikes that they can ride like from our house to his house. So just giving my older two at least permission that
you have access to either me or Dad.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too. Obviously, we have to have structure, and I would take them if they wanted to go to his house anytime, but for them to feel like they can freely go from place to place, I think is a really big deal.
when it can work out that way, it is a big deal for kids. I'll tell you that.
And that was a priority for both of us, and just figuring out where he could live that was still close. I think the hardest, like emotionally, I think it's been the hardest on my 3-year-old, which makes sense because he doesn't have words to like express what he's feeling. So for him, it's come out in like tantrums or just being a little bit more difficult or scratchy, or he doesn't know how to like say, my life is changing, like the two most important people in my life. And so and that's been tricky for him to, I mean, he's pretty verbal for a 3-year-old, so he can say things, but I think just him processing and understanding that and just trying to be consistent of how we respond has
big feelings in this little body.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling. So it comes out sometimes in that behavior and those huge expressions.
Does it ever make you feel like, oof, was this the right thing to do?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I feel like that's pretty normal to be like
100% normal.
When like I'm making this huge decision that I know in my heart is right for me, but of course I'm like, would it have just been easier to not make this decision? Because look at how much pain it's causing my children. And I think that's what prevented me from making that decision for so long is the worry of how this huge change is going to affect. It's not just my decision that affects me, like, but it affects my entire family. Yeah. And so absolutely, like when in those moments, it's like, wow, this is really freaking hard. And like, what am I doing? Like questions like that, of course, like I feel that.
The flip side of that though is, and I guess I can say this from being in my own relationship, not that I've had children that would be affected by it, but at the end of the day, if I am not peaceful and I am not thriving, then I'm not taking care of myself. And as a mother, if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not putting yourself into the place where you feel whole and happy, your children are they're gonna figure that out anyway.
Oh yeah.
They're gonna pick it up.
Yeah, they will, and mothers will, of all the people that they sacrifice typically the most for their own, it will be their children. Like I will stay in misery if it means that you stay happier. So again, that's why I think it's such a brave choice.
But they're not necessarily happier.
And what's interesting about that
they feel
is,
it.
Yeah, and I think what you do as a mother is ultimately create these complexes for your children because there is no honesty and no authenticity, and so you're just kind of in this disillusioned state about a lot of things.
I remember when my parents were going through that whole phase, and I would be like, I'd pull them aside separately and be like, are you guys going to get a divorce? And they were like, where'd you hear that word?
Yeah.
And it was just so palpable to me. Absolutely. Yeah. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and go into their room and see if they were still in the same bed together.
No.
So your children, I mean, I can speak to this part because I'm the child of a divorced, of divorced parents, that there was so much angst. And when my dad left, it was like, for me, in that moment, it was like, cool, we get to play now. Mm. And that wasn't necessarily the rest of the emotion from the other people in the family. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll dial it down. But there was a sense in me, like, I'm so glad that there's not going to be this dynamic anymore.
It was full of conflict.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was eggshells.
Yeah.
All the time.
That's hard.
It makes me think about my own mother, who she lived in survival mode. She still does.
Yeah.
And she came from extreme poverty in Puerto Rico, and they made it to the United States with very little and had to assimilate and all of this. And throughout her whole marriage, my father lived many, many other lives. And they were married for 20 years. And I mean, my dad was sloppy with it, all that he did. It's really quite fascinating.
It was very perfect. It was obvious.
It was so obvious. Yeah. And she didn't know until year 20 when all of it started to come out. And you wonder how much she just ignored, how much she just suppressed and turned a blind eye and just kind of kept on the survival track of what is expected of her to take in and do for her family and be a woman. And
so when you look at the Body Keeps Score as a kid, see if you can remember this. Do you remember feeling like, so the cost of that still would have shown up in her emotional body, even if she wasn't consciously aware, because attachment problems work that way? Did you sometimes see your mom battle with depression or anxiety or more that dissociative kind of flat state?
Anger.
Okay.
Lots of anger. Yeah.
And did you guys pay the price of that sometimes?
Oh, yeah. And we still do. 10 years after her divorce, we still do. And she's evolving quite beautifully these last few years. I'm really proud of her. And anyway, that's a whole other podcast.
Sure. Yeah.
The mother-daughter
mother-daughter relationships. Or parental relationships. Yeah.
Let's put it on the calendar now.
Yeah. But anyway, just to bring that full circle, I wonder if my mama had made choices for herself and her well-being and her self-care, how different it all would have looked.
Right.
You know, and she ignored those feminine parts.
Yeah.
And just kept on the survival track and suppressed it all. And I, as the adult daughter looking back, I wish that my mother had chosen herself more and made those sort of risky and brave decisions.
Yeah. Something powerful. Karina's been a huge part of like my journey as I go through this. But something I just remember really clearly, like saying to you, is that just that maybe it's easier if I stay or easier if I don't make that decision. And you just were like, just like, is it easier? Like it feels like it in a lot of ways, but is it actually easier to like not follow my heart or follow what I know is right for me? Because I think from like a societal standpoint, or just there are a lot of ways it's easier, but ultimately I don't think it's the easier decision, even though it can feel that way.
Sure, in the moment.
Yeah.
And the beautiful piece of that is human connection, right? Is resourcing a friend and somebody that says, I see you, I love you. And so this is coming from a place of love, like you, whatever choice you make, I'll honor and love you for. But for it easier. All that's wrapped up into the way that she showed you support. And women need that.
Yeah.
Instead of competition and knock off your crown and kiss your face, but I'm going to be really awful behind. And I think when women can really support each other and be there for each other, it really helps through some of the toughest times. Is again that community, that resourcing, going, I don't want to feel so alone in this landscape, because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard decision.
I think we've been up for each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like a lot.
Yeah. You guys can see it in the emotion that comes up into your eyes, the way that you have felt supported by each other. And that's what I think is, when we're being wired for connection, that is so important, is that in our most challenging times, we have people that we can lean on that love us and that say, we got you.
Yeah.
You need, I don't have to fix it for you, but you need a voice of support and love, and I'm here for you. There are so many times where, I've watched my friends do it, is they're kind of staying in relationships that don't serve them. And I could sit there and be like, hey, this isn't good for you. And I've said it. But also, like, if you still choose it, I love you.
Yeah.
Like, how can I help you?
Right.
Sometimes the message is, I'm here, and how can I help?
That unconditional love.
Yeah. It's huge. I do remember when my kids were asked me if we were getting divorced, and I was really irritated about it, because my ex-husband and I had talked about really being thoughtful about how we talk to them about it. But he had obviously, and as we resource our friends, he had resourced some of what were our friends. And their son was best friends with my oldest. And out of nowhere, he's like, are you guys getting divorced? I was like, why are you asking that? He's like, well, because so-and-so told me that you guys are getting divorced. And I was like, cool. I'm really irritated right now. I even told him that. I was like, this is not the way that Dad and I would want to tell you. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, yeah, whatever. And like tears. And I was like, I remember calling my friend and her husband at the time. I was like, sure wasn't the way I wanted to introduce that to my son. It's like, if you, and it's not, and to me, it wasn't on the kid, because he was a 9-year-old too. Like, you can say, don't say anything, but he did. And so to me, that was on the parents. And I was like, just so you know, that was not well done. And that you didn't let us tell our sons that. And I'm frustrated. And I think it's important to be able to say those kind of things, to have boundaries with the way that you want to talk to your kids, the way that you want to give that information. Then I had to sit down later with their dad and be like, guys, we're the same kind of thing. We love you. Sometimes relationships change, and it's going to be hard on you. And this is what I would say to people listening to this is, one of the things that's really powerful for kids is you get to have a relationship with me and dad independent of how me and dad feel about each other. And hopefully me and dad are able to maintain harmony and good co-parenting dynamics here. The sophistication of that language is going to change with their age, right? When you get to a 3-year-old or 4-year-old, I'm going to say. So I just said, I just want to make sure you guys know that you're allowed to have whatever relationship you want to have with this other parent. Again, separate from abuse and super toxic situations, regardless of how we end up feeling about each other.
Yeah.
You don't have to be in the middle of it. Because too many times kids are in the middle of that and weaponized against each parent, and it's horrible for the kid. It's horrible and it's hard on them. It's stressed up in nervous systems. And that's one of the things that I remember talking to my ex-husband about. I remember sitting in the car as I just got done with work. We had met up and I was like, okay, this is happening. He's like, yeah, I think so. I think we're there. And I was like, all right. We had both been in like therapeutic environments. And I said, we've seen parents do this horribly. We've seen them weaponize their kids against each other. I said, promise me no matter who you bring into your life, and I'll promise you this, that we never put our kids in the middle having to choose between us. Is that first and foremost, those kids get to have relationships with us independent of how we feel about each other, even if you end up hating them about you. He's like, well, I don't think I ever will. But I'm like, well, if you do, please promise me right now that we will always let our kids have healthy relationships with each other, with us independent of that. And that's something we've stuck to, and we've not been married for 8 years. Yeah. So it's huge.
I love that so much, and I also loved the question that kind of started this whole recent conversation on like how do you talk to your kids about this, right? Is it age appropriate? And I think really it changes all the time. Like there really is no like finite answer for it. Mm-hmm. And I remember once upon a time just being very simple and very clean. And now as they're getting older and I'm sort of over my grief, I can be a little bit more transparent. And what I've realized is that in that transparency, my sons are learning so much about the human experience, right? Like, I'm human. I'm sad. I am struggling. I feel this, I feel that. And I'm going to have hard days. I need to do some self-care. I'm going to actually take a bath. So I'll check in an hour. Or, like I tell my boys, I'm on my moon, and they just get it, So it's like this just...
I love that you've educated your boys that way. Because when they're in relationships, it's going to matter.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I don't know, I feel like I'm just not interested in the veneer and being the strong, mom. And I'm more like, I'm struggling, I'm grieving, and being able to just talk about children about what grief is. Mm-hmm. I didn't have that word in my vocabulary, until I was an adult. And so, I don't know. I love where I'm at now with my children, where I can be more open about my process, my emotional states, and I can now connect it to like my femininity, like where I am in my cycle and how, that comes through and comes up, and that I'm okay. I'm going to do my job to like transmute it and release it. And so, I don't know, I think there's like an educational piece to that too, to show them that we're not perfect. And I'm not always...
I think it's so important for our kids to see our humanity and to recognize the arc of our emotional experience without burdening them with our emotions, but saying, I'm human too. Yeah. And this is, I can't tell how many times I've told my teenage son, I'm like, hey, what did I do today that like, tell me what I did that thinks that you can talk to me like that. Like, did I just really disrespect you? Like, tell me what I did to be treated this way. Because I don't think I deserve it. So if I do, you better let me know. And he's like, oh, I'm just having a bad day. I'm like, cool, well, don't disrespect me because you're having a bad day. Yeah. But reminding him, like, you get to have your emotions, but I do too. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be a battering ram or a lightning post for you just because I'm your mom. Yeah. Like, I love you, but you get to experience my emotions too.
Yeah, and you showing up authentically that way teaches
emotional intelligence.
Emotionally intelligent. Yes,
emotional intelligence. I can't tell you how important that is. I worked at a young adult program for a while, and the lack of emotional intelligence in these 18 to 25-year-olds and having to cultivate it, it's to me, if you're going to have raw intelligence, you're going to be smart, I think emotional intelligence is just as important. if not sometimes more important, because it's how you traverse the world and connections and relationships. And if you don't have emotional intelligence, I can't tell you how many times people are like, that's just who I am. I'm like, no, it's not.
And it's so unattractive.
Yeah, I'm like, it's not how you are. You can learn something different. It's not just how you are. Nobody has to put up for a lack of emotional intelligence when there's 1,000 free YouTube videos that you can watch that can grow your emotional intelligence. So, do you want to do it or not? Like, and I'm not even going to have to pay for a therapist to do that. Like, go watch Bessel van der Kolk or Gabor Mate, or go watch, the emotions guy that wrote the emotions code, or there's the I Feel Emotions book that I'm trying with David Burns. There's so many free resources out there. When someone's like, that's just how I am, I'm like, that's a cop out.
Right.
And if you're not willing to go watch a couple of 10 to 20 minute videos to help start growing your emotional intelligence, then that's a big, huge you issue.
Yeah.
And then when you wonder why your relationships aren't flourishing, I'm going to double you back to, what are you doing to work or not work on yourself? When I taught in anger management class, I did it for 5 years. I can't tell you how many times, it's not just about anger and anger being a secondary emotion. It was, y'all need better emotional regulation skills. So how do we start teaching those? And so sometimes it was amazing to them how sometimes literally I talked about the word anger and emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so when you foster that in the children, right, they are so much more prepared.
And you also teach them accountability.
Yeah. And, by the way, how to navigate relationships so that either they don't stay in ones that aren't healthy for them, or that if they stay in them, they know how to have the tenacity to go through hard times. Because there is a growing, I don't say it's just a generation, but there's a growing trend in, this is too hard, I'm out. I'm like, listen, if it's not healthy for you and you've tried, get out. But I can't tell you how many times I have to be like, we've tried very hard. We're trying to exit this. So let's just maybe try a couple things. And if it's still, right, because again, I think it's a brave choice to leave something that isn't healthy for you. But sometimes this kind of got hard and I don't want to do it anymore. Right. I'm like, whoa, this relationships are hard, period. So if you're not ready to do some work in them to also cultivate the joy, then we got to grow your resilience and being able to have a relationship. And that includes 1,000% having emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So teaching our kids that is huge. Yeah. As well said, yes. Well, is there anything, ladies, before we close that you'd want to add about your experience? If you follow the listeners that we have, like, if you had to say something to them about this experience you've had, what would it be?
I think there's just like so much duality in it that it is really hard. And then there's been moments that I'm just like excited, relieved. Like, I just think it's such an emotional, like such a range of emotions in the experience. And I'm just like riding the wave. So I don't know if I don't have like.
But maybe that's it, right?
Yeah.
Like be ready to ride the wave. And you're not wrong. It's not linear.
Yeah, at all.
Right?
Yeah.
It's expect. And even if I could have projected and thought about all the experience that I thought I would have had, it was harder.
Yeah.
I still would have done it. But I do tell this to my couples that I counsel. And they're like, well, because people tell you the grass isn't greener on the other side. I'm like, it's not. And divorce is hard. And sometimes it's the best thing for you. So try everything you can. But it's, don't kid yourself that it's tough. Like there's a difficult piece of, there's just going to be a lot of emotions to ride that way. So
there's really so much I want to say, but something that keeps coming through is, we discussed, or you asked the question of how to get back to your femininity when this life and these situations that we find ourselves in, going through divorce or being single mothers, puts us so much in our masculine. And it got me thinking of how I do that. And, self-care comes to mind, but I think really underneath it all is, I ask myself this question all the time, like, why am I bitter? And I've realized recently that was one of the most transformative decisions of my womanhood, was to decide I'm no longer going to be bitter. And one way to get out of my bitterness about life and the life challenges is to create ceremony around my grief and around the cyclical nature of being a woman, which is going through the death and the rebirth process over and over again. And when you look at our bodies, we're doing it every single month.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
well said.
Yeah, I've just found that creating ceremony around these cycles and these processes in life, these challenges, has brought the beauty and has taken me far from bitterness And it's allowed me to, I don't know, almost like find the death as this exciting journey where I'm like going into the darkness, but I got this inner light. So I'm like in this dark cave, this under earth dark cave, and it's cold and it's scary. There's unknown, there's creatures. But with this inner light, I can like walk through it and go deeper and deeper. And I know that like in the descent of myself and in my death and what I'm transmuting, that there are like really beautiful treasures in the depth of that cave.
You're gonna find them.
Yeah,
beautiful.
And it requires my aloneness. It requires my inner power. And that ceremony, going through your descent into yourself to capture those jewels that only exist in the darkness alone, to then grab, you learn so much in that grief, in that place.
And when you grab them, do you find that that's what illuminates them, the darkness, right?
Yeah.
So through that refiner's fire, that struggle, sometimes that darkness that felt unsettling, then you find that treasure and you go, okay, wow, that was scary and I didn't know where we were going to go, but look at what I found.
Yeah.
And then it's such a growing, it's strengthening part of you that grows your resilience. It grows you immensely.
Yeah.
And then also connects you, I think, ultimately to not just your gifts and talents, but your strength-based essence. Like what makes us powerful as women, what makes us powerful as individuals, what makes us powerful as ourselves. And that moving forward, and this is a huge place, I think, for women to get, that leave relationships and then traverse the world and eventually find other relationships. Because again, I think we're beings wired for connection. It's not if we need connections, we do need them. So even if we don't get another relationship, I do think we need community and people and connections and good friends. But through that, we're able to say, I know me, and when I get into something that I want it, I don't need it. I want it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm in a relationship right now where there isn't anything that I need monetarily from my relationship. And it's so freeing and empowering. It is, I just want it. We want each other. We want to share our life together. And that feels so good. And it feels, in a way, so much safer because I feel like I could leave it if I needed to. So then my choice to stay is so much more powerful.
You choose it every day.
Yeah, it's awesome. So we're choosing each other every day.
Yeah.
That's how he feels about it too. He could leave it. I remember one time he told me, he's like, I feel like you've broken the stallion and I'm here. And I was like, hold on a sec. No one can break you. You're the wild, you know him. Yeah. I was like, you're a wild stallion regardless. He's like, I said, let me just tell you. I said, you're that stallion that doesn't have to have a bridle or a halter. It's like the black stallion that lets you ride it because it lets you. It's never going to be tamed. Here's one. I really like that one. I was like, you're no stallion caught in a pen, dude. I was like, you choose this every day and you can unchoose it. I said, I know you have choices. I said, and so it speaks to your nature to choose this every day because you're still wild and you want this. So I recognize that you could unwant it one day.
Yeah. There's so many other good topics.
I know.
This one conversation.
Keep doing this.
I'm like, oh my goodness.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. For us, we want to be a voice that when people listen to this, they go, that helped me, or wow, that was insightful, or wow, that resonated with me. That spoke to me. It's just beautiful to see your guys' personalities and how they just show up, and your willingness to, you could just see the emotion in your essence, in your eyes. It's so authentic, and I appreciate that. So.
And I want to say, you're both in business. You have your things that you're doing, your initiatives. And if you want people to contact you, how could they contact you? Whether it's to reach out for support or to
art therapy or retreats,
buy a house from you, like you're business women, you're doing your thing. Like, how can people get in touch with you, Jen?
Probably just on Instagram is like the best way to find me. So it's just Danielle, Daniellem, and then Mira, Mira.
Cool.
Instagram.
Cool. We'll tag you for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely in the construction phase of things, but I love to foster new connections with people that resonate. So I think Instagram is a great way too. Vive Rose, so VIVE.ROSE. And I hope to soon start my work in the integrated wellness scene, bringing in the physical health, the emotional,
the creative and the spiritual.
Nice.
Yeah.
AKA Powerful Women's Retreats. Stay tuned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us on Unscripted. I'm Jenny Poole.
And I'm Janine Borandi.
We hope you found today's discussion as inspiring and insightful as we did. If you have any questions, comments, or stories you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you.
Connect with me on Instagram at The Acupuncturist.
And you'll find me on social media at Mend Counseling Center.
Until next time, remember that the best gift you can give to those you love is the gift of your own good health.